right, and can you see this document on your screen entitled Initial Laboratory Personnel Training?
Yep.
All right, and is this the Tiffany that you were referring to who was hired to work in the lab?
Yes, I guess Seaman, yeah, yep,
And her last name is C-E-M-A-N, correct?
correct.
All right, and there are each of these itemized training items that, do you know if those are her initials that she entered, indicating that she had completed these different modules of training?
I would assume that they are.
Okay, did you work on this document? This is, by the way, Respondents Exhibit 24.
Yes, because all of those dates are my handwriting, and those are my initials.
Okay. And then on the right where it says JD, those are your initials.
Correct.
All right, and then in the comments you wrote there, Tiffany is doing very well in laboratory training, and I will remain with her for the next week to fine-tune her progress. And then you signed it, and it looks like she signed it above your name. Is that correct?
Looks correct.
Okay. And then the laboratory director was Carlos Feliciano,
Correct.
and he signed it as well.
Correct.
Is that your understanding? Okay. So
Yeah.
we offer admission of Respondents Exhibit 24.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay, I will receive Respondents Exhibit 24.
And did Ms. White provide you with training when you came to her facility?
Yes.
And how long did that training last?
It would depend on the type of procedure, because we would have some patients that would only have a certain procedure maybe monthly, but maybe a month, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I mean, I don't remember, but.
Okay. And then were there certain procedures that you were not trained on?
Yeah.
What were those?
I was never trained on the Botox procedures. I was never trained on the vampire facelift procedures. I don't know that I ever actually did the vampire facial procedure itself. I know that I've watched one, but I don't think I ever did one on my own on an actual human being. So those three main procedures.
And are any of those synonymous with PRP?
Yes.
Okay, and that's included within one of the three?
That's included with the vampire facial and facelift.
Okay. And were those things that you were aware that Ms. White could perform, those three items?
Yes.
In terms of performing the nurse practitioner functions, was Ms. White better qualified than you were qualified?
Yes, she knew every procedure and I did not.
Did you ever have any problems with Ms. White's work?
No.
Okay. Did you become aware that she suffers from rheumatoid arthritis?
Yes.
Did you become aware that she was pregnant?
Yes.
Did you have knowledge of Ms. White experience any symptoms related to her pregnancy or her rheumatoid arthritis based on either what she said specifically to you or what you observed?
If you mean, did it affect any part of her job? No. Would she come in at sometimes and her hands would be aching, but it was something that would have been mentioned just casually. It never stopped her from performing her work ever.
Did you ever cover for her when she arrived late?
Yes.
And what indicated to you that she was arriving late for something to do with her? You mentioned her hands.
She would tell us in advance when she had medical appointments in the mornings for her infusion. So we knew in advance if she was going to be late. She was never late, not announced prior.
And when Ms. White was terminated from the facility, did you take over her job duties as the sole provider?
Yes.
When Ms. White was terminated, did Justin Pulliam say that the clinic was going to increase its investment in the clinic in terms of increasing advertising or the volume of work that was going to be done?
After she was terminated?
At the time she was terminated?
No, I mean, that was long before she was terminated. I mean, that was always.
When did, okay, and was there an increase in the volume of work after Ms. White was terminated?
Not in my opinion, no.
And why did you quit or were you terminated?
I quit.
Why did you quit?
Multiple reasons, personal and family related.
Okay. And were any of the reasons related to the work that you were doing?
No.
Did you leave for any reasons associated with your workload?
No.
When you and I talked prior to the hearing, you had mentioned something about doing the work of 3 persons, putting in 90 hours every 2 weeks or words to that effect. You recall that conversation?
Yes. And then they hired
Okay.
Tiffany, which was greatly helpful.
Okay. So what did you mean by that you were doing the work of 3 people?
Because for a time being, I was doing a CNA's role if someone wasn't there. I was doing the lab role if someone wasn't there. I was doing the provider role if someone wasn't there. And there were days when I was doing all 3 roles if people didn't show up.
Okay. And then Tiffany was
There were
hired
many
to
days
take over
Tiffany was
the
not
lab.
there.
Okay.
Correct.
And
Okay,
why
sorry
was she-
that, hold
what-
it, hold it. You need to make sure that you don't talk at the same time because we'll miss, miss things right there. There was a talking over. So I'm not, so could you do that question answer again?
Yeah, and I see a little triangle with an exclamation point in the upper left corner. 2 of the participants.
I don't have
that-
I don't have the yellow triangle of doom on anybody's thing right now. That's what I call it. So
All right. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was participating is supposed to. So if you can see
think
them,
so.
I'm fine with that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, but I don't like that triangle either.
When Tiffany was hired, she was hired to take over the functions in the lab?
Correct.
All right. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Cusgrove?
Good morning, Ms. Driscoll.
Good morning.
You testified just now that you worked in a clinic alongside Miss White. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I think you indicated that you began at that clinic, you began working alongside Miss White in about January or February of 2019. Is that correct?
To my remembrance, it's a guess.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But you were hired by New Medical SC in around November 2018.
Correct.
Okay. And prior to being hired by New Medical SC in November 2018, have you had any previous work with New Mail Medical or New Fem or New Mail? Any
No.
other New Mail clinics?
No.
Did you work for Universal Pain Center?
Yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, is Universal Pain Center associated with New Medical in any means?
To my knowledge, no. But I guess that's administrative stuff I wouldn't know.
Okay. Is UPC also Universal Pain Center? Do they have the same ownership, that being Brad Palubicki and Justin Pulliam?
Yes.
Okay. So you worked with Brad and Justin prior to your stint with at the clinic with Miss White, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so when you worked alongside with Brad and Justin with UPC, what were those dates of employment?
Oh, UPC was May of 2016 through August of 2018.
And what was your role at UPC?
Nurse practitioner.
So under UPC, you had already about 2 years of experience as a nurse practitioner?
At UPC, correct. I had nurse practitioner experience prior to that, but yes.
And did you hold any other position when you worked at UPC?
No.
Okay. And once you left UPC in August of 2018, how did you find employment again with Brad and Justin at New Medical? Was there a job posting or did you reach out to them?
I reached out to them.
Okay.
They had offered me a position when the pain clinic closed. However,
Okay.
I declined it at that time.
Okay, so then it's my understanding is you reached out to them at some point and said, I'd like to work with you guys again.
Correct.
Okay, and how did they respond?
They were very accommodating. They did not have a position for me. They were aware of the situation with the media and the pain clinic and that it was affecting my ability to get employment at the time. And they were extremely accommodating and gave me a position upstairs, still kind of working for UPC under the New Medical umbrella because they did not have a position for me.
Okay. And what was your position title if you had one when you were hired under New Medical?
I don't know if I had one. I was still hired, I think, under nurse practitioner in general, but it's not what I was doing.
Okay. And so when you first came over New Medical, I believe you represented to Mr. Olson in his line of questions that you were upstairs working and at some point you came downstairs to work alongside Miss White. Was that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when you came downstairs, initially, what were your job duties then?
When I was first brought downstairs, I was training in the lab because upstairs I started with the lab written CLIA documentations and modules. So I would come downstairs and then my goal originally was that I was going to be transferring and working in the lab. So that's where I spent the most of my time. Okay.
And you just brought up this CLIA documentation and working, conducting some paperwork for the lab. When you began your employment with New Medical and they had you begin paperwork for the lab and obtaining your CLIA certification, if you will, what was represented to you? Was there any position that New Medical wanted to eventually see you in, or why were they having you trained to work in the lab?
Yes, because they were going to make me the lab director.
Okay. And as a lab director, what's your understanding of the duties of a lab director?
The lab director would oversee the labs and would oversee, and I don't know how many it is per area, but I believe the lab director can oversee 3 to 4 other labs. So my understanding of what they told me was that I would be eventually overseeing the other labs of the other New Mail clinics, depending upon where they were.
Okay, so they were grooming you. They were grooming you to become the lab director. It sounds like.
Correct.
Okay, and to become the lab director, you again mentioned this CLIA training or paperwork. Can you explain, to the best of your knowledge, what that is?
So there was, I want to say, and it's a guess, 15 different modules on lab protocol, quality assurance, anything that involves the type of analytes we were running, all the different types of solutions, standard lab things, I guess I would say. So you'd go through all 15 modules, you had to take tests, you had to pass each module to go to the next module. So it took about 3 straight days of 8 hours straight to go through each module. And then once you completed those, CLIA would sign off that you completed all of those modules once you submitted the information. And then you had to have hours in the lab. I don't know how many hours, or I don't remember, I guess, but I never completed all of the hours.
Okay, but you did take initial steps to get that CLIA certification?
Yes.
Okay. And while we're talking about the lab, at any point, did Ms. White express interest in working in the lab, to your knowledge?
No.
And do you know whether Ms. White, to your knowledge, received any training to work in the lab?
Not to my knowledge.
And to your knowledge, and it sounds like you were working in the lab, did Ms. White ever work in the lab?
No.
And aside from your duties of working the lab and, again, the company grooming you to become the lab director, you represented to Mr. Olson that you were covering 3 different jobs. And I believe the first job you discussed with him is working in the lab. The next was a CNA, which you indicated stood for Certified Nurse Assistant? Certified Nurse Assistant, is it? Okay.
Right.
And then the third was as a nurse practitioner, a role that you indicated Ms. White had trained you. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you also indicated that you would perform these roles when individuals were out of the office, and so you really would just fill in for them while they were gone, whether it was in a CNA role or a nurse practitioner role. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you know why Victoria White started training you to become a nurse practitioner, or why the company asked her to start training you?
Because she was going to be going on maternity leave, so that I could fill in for her while she was gone.
Okay. And so was it ever represented to you that after her return from maternity leave that you would work full-time as a nurse practitioner?
No.
Okay. And so is it a fair statement to say that really it was just for you to cover her duties while she was gone on maternity leave?
Well, no. I feel as though there were 2 different ways, because I wasn't covering for Victoria. I was replacing Olga. So there were 2 ways to look at that. Yeah. So I needed to be trained because Victoria would leave, but the flow of the patients at the time was enough that one provider could handle it.
Okay. And what was Olga's last name, if you recall?
I don't.
Okay. That's okay. But you indicated that that Olga, who was also a nurse practitioner, was leaving. At the same time, and around that time, Ms. White was preparing to go on maternity leave, and so they needed assistance in the nurse practitioner duties, and that's what you would fill in for.
Olga was gone several months prior to Victoria going on maternity leave, if that makes any difference. It wasn't that they were just trying to cram me in there because they were both leaving at the same time. Olga was already gone. Tori would train me when we had patients. She would allow me to come in and show me how things were done, because the understanding was that I would be able to help out when she needed it, and obviously to be able to step in when she did go on maternity leave.
Okay, excellent. And you indicated that when Victoria White trained you, that you weren't trained on all the procedures. There was actually certain procedures that you weren't trained on to complete as a nurse practitioner. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and these are procedures that Ms. White did perform as a nurse practitioner?
Yes.
Okay, but again, the company it was never, to your knowledge, the company's intent to have you work as a nurse practitioner full time, correct?
I don't know what their intent was. They never expressed that that would be my final job, no.
Okay, did they ever express to you that they hired you to replace Victoria White?
No.
Okay. And when Ms. White separated from the company, I believe you also indicated that you took on the nurse practitioner role. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Carlos Feliciano was the director of that clinic. Didn't he also see providers at the clinic at that time?
He saw patients at the clinic, correct.
Okay, so you weren't the only one everything didn't fall just on you. Dr. Feliciano also assisted with overseeing patients?
Yes, he had to, because any procedures I didn't know how to do, they would have to be scheduled for him.
Okay, perfect. So when Ms. White was separated from the company, at that time, did you also continue to perform the roles not only as a nurse practitioner, but did you also continue to perform the roles in the lab as well as a CNA?
If needed, yes.
Okay. And I believe you had represented to Mr. Olson that there were two other individuals, Jose and Travis, who also could work in the lab. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. To your knowledge, did they perform any work on behalf of NewFem?
As far as coming downstairs and working with the female clients?
Correct.
Yes, Travis would come down if we didn't have a nursing assistant and they had an extra one. They would send him down to do vitals and help us room patients.
Okay. So if Travis was seeing some patients, it sounds like he similarly was a practitioner. Would that be a fair statement?
No, Travis was a medical assistant. So he would only take vitals and room them. He could not do anything provider role.
Okay. Do you know whether Jose and Travis were employed solely to work in the lab?
I don't know. I don't think so, because they worked upstairs in other positions. I believe Jose was the manager.
Okay. And when you say upstairs, is that the new mail?
New mail. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So it was a whole different arm of the company.
Correct. New mail was upstairs several floors, and then New Fem was on the third floor, I think.
Okay. And did Jose and Travis primarily work on the new mail side or the New Fem side?
New mail.
Okay.
Could you repeat what Travis's didn't do? Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Travis was the medical assistant, so Travis would come down. When it came down to helping me, Travis would come down and run labs. He knew how to run the lab, and he was also a medical assistant, so he could room the patients, take vital signs, draw blood. But he primarily worked up at New Mail.
I'd like to turn your attention to Respondents Exhibit 26. Which we are putting on the screen shortly.